You're listening to the Dueling Pistols podcast, where we read and discuss the stories of our past and explore some of the most wild adventures from modern history.
No, bro. George Washington said, stay strapped or get clapped, and I'm all about that. I ain't,
Floyd had split his surveying party into 3 groups.
Bro, you never split up. Never split up. You seen Scooby-Doo? Nothing good happens when the group splits.
As they tried to drag the canoe to the shore, Fanny Calloway beat him over the head with the paddle until it broke.
Good job, Fanny.
When the man in front goes down, pick up his rifle and shoot.
I hate this guy.
Yeah?
I hate this guy. I want him dead. I want him to die, and die a somewhat miserable death.
We ain't like the British.
We dissed everything, including the accent.
One of the Shawnees killed that day was the son of the man who would become Boone's captor and adoptive father.
Wow. Bro, this is like a freaking soap opera. That is ridiculous. Does he have an evil twin that's going to pop out sometime too?
Triggered by Black Flag.
Welcome back. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined by my brother, Brent Call. How are you, Brent?
I'm well, thank you.
All right, we're getting back into the book, Boone, a biography written by Robert Morgan. If you don't have the book, I highly recommend getting it. We're jumping through it. We're about 7, 8, 9 episodes into this podcast on this book. We have a few more to go, but I hope you're enjoying it. Let's get into the book. We last left off where Daniel returned to Virginia for his family in 1762. He would have been 28 years old. He's been gone for 2 years. From age 26 to 28, he left Rebecca, his wife, on the frontier while he went out and trapped for 2 years in the wilderness. What happened in that 2 years? Lots of hunting and trapping and Indian run-ins and them stealing his stuff and him doing more trapping and so on. So it says he had been gone for 24 months. And there in Culpeper County, he found Rebecca nursing a new baby named Jemima, born on October 4. Boone's response to the new daughter, born, some would say, while he had been away for 2 years, is one of the high points of his legend. The story is told in several different variations, but all versions agree about Boone's gracious acceptance of the fact.
What's he gonna say? I was gone for 2 years. How dare you?
It says an old settler named Josiah Collins told Reverend John Dabney Shane a version of the story in 1841. When Boone returned home after a 2-year absence, there was a new child in the cradle. Oh, well, says he, whose is it? Why, Brother Squire's, replied his wife, his brothers.
Oh, geez.
Well, says he, one of the name is all the same, and so hushed her up.
I don't know if that's right, Brian. I don't know if that's
Yeah, I mean, if you're sleeping with my wife, it's going to be a little troublesome.
Yeah, because let's be real, he's going to leave again.
It says Lyman Draper collected different versions of the story, and the one he found most plausible was told by James Norman, who claimed to have returned to North Carolina from Virginia with the Boone family that fall of 1762. Remember, Lyman Draper was the guy that was a historian that gathered just a treasure trove of documents and letters and interviews about Daniel Boone, and then never did make a book out of it, but left all that paperwork behind, which was, I think, some university latched onto it, and it's a vast, treasure trove of documents. So this fellow that was that journalist, he collected different versions of the story. According to Norman, Rebecca fell on her knees when Boone returned to Culpeper from his military service and long hunts in the Blue Ridge. Rebecca explained that he was gone so long she assumed he was dead, and she had given birth to someone else's child. When Daniel asked whose child it was, Rebecca confessed the baby belonged to his brother Ned. So now it's not Squire, his brother Squire. Squire is his dad's name and his brother's name.
Gotcha.
But he's like, it's not, this time it's Ned. Rebecca was reported to have said that Ned looked so much like Daniel. It might as well have been you. You look the same. Okay, as John
Turn the candles down low. You'll never know.
As John Mack Faragher points out, such stories color the folklore of the frontier. With men gone on hunts, long hunts, on expeditions with militias, prospecting for minerals, or captured by Indians, there were many opportunities for husbands to disappear so long they were assumed to be dead. In some stories, the husband or fiancé reappears just as the woman is about to take her vows in a new marriage. In almost all versions, the husband and wife reconcile and there is a new baby. The returned husband accepts it as his own. And if there is a new baby, the husband accepts it as his own. In all its variations, this has been one of the favorite stories about Boone for the past 2 centuries and more. For some, it has illustrated what a lazy, easygoing man Boone was, staying off in the woods, hunting and gallivanting, maybe cohabitating with an Indian wife, while Rebecca did the farm work and raised the children, not knowing if Daniel was dead or alive, but assuming he was dead. With the desires of a healthy woman, she had sought the comfort of another man. With Boone, when Boone returns, he is so shiftless and feckless, he doesn't seem to care much one way or the other. But others have seen the story as an illustration of Boone's tolerance and large spirit. He understands the trials and temptations Rebecca has known, and when told the child is Ned's or his brother Squire's, he says, at least it's in the family, his wit and humor intact. In no version does Daniel get angry, accuse his wife, or threaten to leave her. At the very least, he accepts the inevitable as the very best. At the very best, he takes the child as his own and leads his family back to Sugar Tree Creek on the Yadkin. It is an interesting fact that Jemima became Boone's favorite child. It was she he rescued in a daring pursuit when she was kidnapped at Boonesboro in 1776. It was Jemima who waited for him to return to Boonesboro after he was captured by the Shawnees in 1778. It says it was Jemima who waited for him to return to Boonesboro after he was captured by the Shawnees in 1778. So 2 years into the war against the British Empire, he was captured by the Shawnees, when the rest of the family, assuming he was dead, returned to North Carolina. It was with Jemima that Boone lived much of the time after the death of Rebecca in Missouri near the end of his life. Those who argue against the truth of the story point out that the treaty with the Cherokees was signed at the Long Island of the Holston, November 19, 1761, and after that, Boone likely left the militia and returned to Virginia and brought his family back to the Yadkin in plenty of time to father Jemima. They also point out that Ned had recently married Rebecca's sister Martha, and it is unlikely he would have been sleeping with his double sister-in-law, Rebecca. Daniel's brother Squire was serving his apprenticeship as a blacksmith in Maryland at this time. They also note that the witnesses, such as James Norman, have so many facts wrong that their stories are not to be credited. All versions of the story contradict each other. It's likely that Boone did return to his family in Virginia during the 1761-62 winter and bring them back to Sugar Tree. The biographer H. Addington Bruce stated flatly that he brought his family back to the Yadkin as soon as peace had been made. The genealogist Spraker says that Jemima was born in North Carolina. There is no evidence to suggest otherwise. With Daniel's known distaste for farming, he would have brought Rebecca and the children to help him plant a crop before he went on his summer hunt. Culpeper, Virginia is about 250 miles from the Yadkin, a week's journey by horseback. Folklore grows from the pleasure of telling a good story, adding even better surprise and punchline. In the many versions of this story of the illegitimacy of one of Boone's children, we see folklore come to life and grow. If his story is good enough, it takes on vitality, a kind of truth of its own, with little connection to its source. Whether true or not, the story of Jemima's begetting adds something important to the portrait of Rebecca that has come down to us. Her beauty and strength and grace and kindness are mentioned in every account. But the story of the child conceived with another man while Daniel was away and presumed dead makes her vivid in a special way, giving her a life independent of Daniel. She is not just the patient, handsome wife toiling while her husband is away. She is also human, with fears and desires, insecurities and hopes. Without Daniel, her life would still go on. Assuming that her husband is dead, she is lonely and in need of love, and she turns to a man nearby who looks like her husband, then must live with the scandal of the new pregnancy and anxiety about her husband's possible return. Many years after Boone's death, Draper corresponded with an old man named Stephen Hamstead, who claimed to have heard a version of the story from Boone himself when they were neighbors in Missouri. In this clearly apocryphal version, Boone said he had been captured by Indians and when he returned home had found his wife with a new baby. She had supposed him dead, etc., etc. He inquired who would be the father of the child when born. She told him, "A certain Boone," he answered. "You need not distress yourself about it." He told her not to worry, for he had 1 or 2 Indian wives while away. Miss Boone was present at the time he told me, the old neighbor related to Draper, and she made her knitting needles fly very fast, I assure you. Yeah, it says, in the Victoria area, the stories of the illegitimate child were suppressed by several Boone biographers who thought they might damage the reputation of the frontier hero. The Reverend John Mason Peck, who interviewed Boone in 1818 but did not publish his biography until 1847, avoided the story altogether and explained that Boone was free to go into the wilderness for long periods because he had large sons who could do the farm work for Rebecca. Each age wants to see its heroes in its own image, in ways that reflect the pieties and sentiments of its day. As Faragher reminds us, it is important to remember that frontier culture in the 18th century was much rougher and more tolerant than that of the 19th century society. In one version of the tale of the illegitimate child, told by a woman, Rebecca gets the last line, "You had better have stayed at home and got it done yourself," she says to Boone.
Hey. Not wrong.
Yeah, what do you think?
It would suck. That'd be something I'd struggle with if I came home with my wife, but like also I wouldn't be gone for 2 years. Like that just not in me.
Maybe. I mean, you're a product of your time, right?
100%.
If you have the skill set to go out into the wilderness and gather, wealth and to do something you love at the same time, that's his job. That's what he does. That's what they sort of signed on to together. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you got to wonder, what her needs were at the time and thinking he was dead and all of that. Mm-hmm. Again, it's likely it's not true. It's likely that Jemima is his child. And
yeah, that's kind of what I was like. They were like, he had it, but maybe not.
I mean, he could have hooked up with her at some point, just briefly. Mm-hmm. She got pregnant.
2 years is a long time to stay away and never check in on your house and your family.
Right. Especially if your stuff did get stolen, you had to come back, get some traps, get some horses, get some stuff, it's hard to say for sure. But I think one of the points to consider is, look, this is a folklore story in a sense. Like, why did it come to be? Why does it matter? Why is it being told and retold and told and retold? Because most likely there are elements of truth to it. Mm-hmm. Right?
And it helps paint a picture of what it's like back then, too.
Yeah, it's basically like, this is a real world situation, and human beings are human beings, and things happen.
Boone's not the first guy to come home to a baby that wasn't his.
And the real struggle of a woman on the frontier waiting for a husband to come back, not knowing if he's dead or alive, And
so, a lot of the times he was dead. He didn't come back.
Anyway, very interesting story. I'll leave it at that. It'll be touched on throughout the book here and there. The Boone's fifth child, Lavina, was not born until March 23rd of 1766, about 4 years after the return to Sugar Tree Creek on the Yadkin. Whether this reflects discord between Daniel and Rebecca, we don't know. But we do know this was a period of increasing economic difficulty for Daniel. His family and his responsibilities were growing, and the game on which he depended for his livelihood was receding farther and farther. As more settlers moved in and the valley was safer from Indian attacks, he had to range further to the west to find deer and beavers and mink and otter. It was a dilemma he faced after each of his moves. Wherever Boone went, others would follow, and soon the game was thinned out, the streams empty of fish and fur. He and others would like him, helped destroy the very thing that drew them into the woods. One cannot kill 30 deer in a day or 90 plus bears in one season and keep repeating the pattern in the same place for very long.
It's very true.
Mm-hmm. It's going to cause a push west. And the very thing he loved to do, he was also, ushering in the disappearance of it because of that. It says one of the reasons that Boone was attracted to regions that still had Indians was that when the Indians left, the game disappeared. Think about it. One of the Indians didn't hunt to.
Oh, that's if there's no Indians. There's no game
hunt.
around. You're right.
They didn't commercial hunt. They just hunted, grabbed a few bears, and that was it. They didn't kill 90. They didn't kill 30. They just killed what they needed and left the hunting grounds alone. Boone and many settlers didn't do that. They hunted commercially. So they sold what they captured, what they hunted. And so when they hunted it out, they'd have to move further west to find more game. Now, the Indians, wherever they were, there wasn't a lot of competition from other white hunters, right? Because very few are crazy enough to go in to Indians' area and try to trap, because you get killed, unless you're Daniel Boone. And so Daniel, I liken it to this, Ryan Lampers and I go and we do some pretty cool hunts in areas where there is the highest density of grizzlies in the United States, in the lower 48, and probably in America, period. And there's a lot of grizzly bears, and they're big and they're bold, coming out of the Yellowstone Park and stuff like that. Guess what?
They're not getting hunted. They see people.
Guess what? When we go there, we don't run into other hunters. Like, we have these places to ourselves. Why?
Because there's a small truck walking around that can eat you.
Exactly. And so those that are brave enough to deal with the bears, they have better hunting options than those who are, you could say, less brave or more sane. Choose your...
Those less likely to be ate by a bear. Yeah.
And so, in the same way, Indian country has the best game in it because the white commercial hunters are too afraid to go there. And so only the few are going to really reap the benefits of that. And Daniel Boone seems to be one of them. It says that the collision between love of hunting and hunting skill and a sustainable ecology is at the heart of the contradiction in Boone's life in the history of modern America. The prowess and persistence of men like Boone made the decline of the game inevitable. There is some evidence that Boone began to understand this later in his life, or at least had an inkling of the consequence of settlement and sustained hunting.
He had to have seen the pattern after his whole life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like,
after
he
a
had
while,
to have seen it.
he sees the pattern. But I have heard, historians mention accounts where those that were hunting, especially like buffalo hunters, them saying, there's no way, there's just too many buffalo. You can't hunt them out. Back in the day, in the 1700s, 1800s, I believe there was a study done to find out if it was possible for human beings to catch too many fish in the ocean. And the study came back and said, there's no way. You can't do it. It's impossible. The study was based on the current levels of technology. They didn't anticipate ever increasing levels of technology, which then made it possible to actually overharvest the ocean itself, which then did jeopardize certain species of fish and giant schools of cod and things like that were being eradicated or on the brink of extinction because of overhunting, overfishing. That's a very real thing. But when you're that generation that just sees millions of buffalo, it seems like you can harvest to your heart's content and the supply never goes away. It's hard to imagine. And I read these accounts where these buffalo hunters are like, I had no idea. I didn't envision it. Later they do. Later, Theodore Roosevelt is out there trying to find a buffalo, just one alive, still on the prairie, and can't find one. And it becomes very clear. The buffalo are disappearing. But by then, it's like they're there one day, gone the next. Like, it happens so fast when you begin to notice that they're really disappearing. And I just think that many people at the time, first of all, if you're a cattle owner, you want the buffalo gone. Mm-hmm. If you're a domestic
with you.
cattle company, you want them gone. If you're a farmer, you want them gone. If you're growing crops, you want them gone.
Anyone who owns a fence, you want them gone.
And these settlers are just like trying to survive. The future of the buffalo is of little concern to them.
Do they even
the
think
ecology
about it?
Of the planet is of less concern. They're thinking about a place to live, to raise their kids, to have some comforts, to prepare for the future, to have others. So it turns out that caring about wildlife and conservation and the future and the planet is in many ways a luxury of the wealthy. And the poverty-stricken, they don't have time for that. Places in Africa, they don't have time to worry about the elephants. In fact, perhaps it'd be nice if the elephants were gone, they'd stop smashing their crops.
Walking through the streets, throwing people around. You can't really stop an elephant, Brian.
Right. And so it's kind of, it should tell someone, it should inform a person that the better off, the wealthier, the more a human's needs are met, the more elevated their causes become, the more they can concern themselves with ecology and the planet and things outside their immediate need. Look, if you're getting shot at and your kids are getting shot at and you're starving to death, the least of your concerns is what's happening to the trout in the river next door. Like, you're just dodging bullets and trying to find some food. And you really don't care if you light the river on fire to stop your enemy from crossing it. Like, what's happening to the animals is just not there. So, in many ways, they're just trying to carve out an existence in this frontier. And it's brutal. And today we just don't understand how brutal it was and how much they exploited the resources, in many ways for survival. And yeah, Boone does figure it out, but young people, I heard Ranella write once, when he was young, he tended to just think about exploit, gather more animals, trap more game, do this. Conservation didn't cross his mind or even how it worked. And as he got older, and he got a more thankful heart, and he started to think about, like,
we have this,
all the animals that he's taken away and a need to give back to the community and to conservation. You evolve, you grow up, you mature. But when you're young, it's like you're kind of just thinking about the adventure. When you're older, you're thinking about how can I ensure that my kids can inherit what I got to have? How can we ensure the planet is in better condition than where we left it? Where we started with it, So it says that he wasn't a very good businessman at all. And, there's little evidence that, he restrained himself in his commercial hunting for deer, hides, and furs. He never took part in the mass killing of buffalo for sport or for their tongues or anything like that. But he was very much part of the rush to strip the wilderness of its finest yields. In this time, of course, the wilderness and game seemed endless. And the very world he sought to flee followed him and planted itself in his tracks. Now, it says that Daniel Boone was, there's a lot written about him. He's like a young, dumb kid that borrows money and doesn't pay it back. Like credit card debt, kind of. He'll worry about it later. So he'll borrow money to get traps, a horse, just to get himself out there. I'll pay you back. But then the Indians steal everything, and he comes back and he's like, dude, I don't have the money to pay you back. Can I have a few more traps, though? I'll get your money later. And it's this cycle. So he tends to, it says already by the time he brought his family back to Virginia, there was a pattern that would recur throughout much of the rest of his life. And I see this with a lot of young people, especially when they get into debt and credit card debt and so forth. He goes on a long hunt, needs supplies, provisions, powder, blah, blah, blah. Tools and all this for farming and all that. And he buys them from people on credit. And then he returns from the hunt. He sells it, but he never has enough cash to cover what he borrowed, and with interest and so on. And so it's this cycle where he just keeps interest accumulating on the debts and he can't pay. And when he gets the harvest, much of it goes back to his interest. And it's the same cycle you have today, as old as time, where people borrow more than they can afford. They get themselves stuck in high interest debt, and then all the money that they have ends up getting wasted in interest, and they can't ever get ahead. When you're paying high interest rates on top of a low income and you borrowed money, like you're in trouble. It says most people cannot appreciate that a debt is an act of imagination. A debt is a gesture of faith, of confidence in the future, a reaching forward to make use of wealth not yet acquired. Debtors, like gamblers, live in an uneasy state of hope and despair, but try to dwell on hope. The qualities that made Boone such a legendary man of the frontier also contributed to the mire of debt he never seemed to be able to struggle out of. For by the time he paid off one debt, he had already acquired another. His hopefulness, his curiosity, his forward-looking faith in himself and others, his confidence in his destiny, characteristics that made him a successful hunter and explorer and leader, seemed to cripple him when it came to business. His way of dealing with troubles in town, the mounting figures and ledgers and the summonses to court, was to plunge into the mountains again, to harvest hides and meat and furs and ginseng to pay the debts, but also to forget the unpleasant consequences of his borrowing. It has been said that Boone had the temperament of an artist, that he was a poet of the woods, the hunt, the exploration of mysteries beyond the next ridge. Boone was described by the early biographer Timothy Flint as essentially a poet. He was an acute observer, studying the signs and weather and the natives, and he felt an ancient kinship with the forest. He loved contemplation and solitude, yet was a good companion on the trail, popular with neighbors, fellow hunters, and scouts. The Indians seemed to be in awe of him. You know, you have those personality traits that people have where one of the things I'm fascinated by that I've studied quite a bit is the idea where, you know, there's a few podcasts. One of them was done by Modern Wisdom, actually. Chris Williamson did a podcast. Tim Ferriss has done a few where they talk about artists not being able to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely talented photographers not able to make money.
Do you know what the percentage of people who graduate from art school that are able to make a living, $35,000 a year? Do you know what percentage is?
No.
That actually make a living off their degree?
No.
It's less than 10%. And those are people who go to school for this.
Right. I think it's fascinating because creative folks are the very thing that makes them and enables them to be creative is also the very thing that makes it so they cannot monetize what they do.
Almost definitely.
Like there's a disconnect it doesn't help that most of these people would do this thing for free because the creativity of it is so fulfilling. Yet you got to make a living. That balance between being creative but also being able to monetize your efforts, that's a difficult balance to achieve. And Boone is definitely open, creative. He has a open personality trait, very creative. It's a fascinating character that he plays, a person that he is. And it's not shocking that he struggles on this side of the equation when it comes to the sense of urgency isn't really there with Boone. It's like you said, hurry. Why hurry? Why hurry out there? You'll pass more than you'll ever get to, you know. That takes a personality that's, you know, patient, not worried too much about the future, that cares more about the moment and lives for the now.
I wonder how much of him even paid attention to his debt.
Eventually, as it does with many, many people who get stuck in this, you can't ignore it anymore because it becomes such a monster that it follows you everywhere you go. You know, you see people who are getting things repoed that are the repo man's coming to their office and trying to get their stuff, and they're my wife and girls like that show, Confessions of a Shopaholic. And in that movie, it's a total chick flick. And in that movie, you know, she's borrowing money, spending money she doesn't have, constantly in debt. And there's a credit card dude his character is the best, and he is just out to get her, you know, burn her and make her pay her debts back. And he comes after her hard over and over again. And she's like lying at work, pretending like it's a stalker, gets him kicked out of the building because she lies to the people there, things like that. You know, the reason it's funny is because it's real. Mm-hmm. It's what people do. And she has to build one lie on another because she's embarrassed because she's borrowed so much and isn't paying it back. And it's not like this is unique to Boone in one way, because years ago I got out of debt. I came upon Dave Ramsey because my buddy Anthony told me about it, and I read his book, The Total Money Makeover. Then I bought the DVDs for Financial Peace University. We took the courses. We had mentors that helped us along the way. Suzanne and I, my wife, we got completely out of debt. We built up 3 to 6 months of savings. We started investing in 401ks in the future and all of that, and completely changed our view of how money works and how we were going to live. It was spiritual. We were no longer in the chains of debt. Nobody told us, we didn't owe anybody any money. And when that happens, the whole world opens up to you. Mm-hmm. You're the boss of yourself. And it's amazing. Well, until the Biden inflation came along, it was amazing how much you could get by with for expenses when you have no debt. Debt is the eater of wealth. Mm-hmm. So when you pay cash for things, when you stay in a budget, you spend what you make and you put some aside for a rainy day. That's a different way of living. And it wasn't until I was quite older that I got there. I mean, I was like a lot of people with huge amounts of revolving credit card debt, small loans, a $40,000 truck payment, a toy hauler, just things. I tried to, at 24, have the wealth that it took my grandparents 60 years to build, all at once, Mm-hmm. So, anyway, but there's also a lot of, I think, lending practices that are predatory, taking advantage of people like Boone who are creative and the way they are. And there's lenders who are like, yeah, we could get this guy roped into poverty his whole life, take everything he owns. Like, yeah, let's loan him some money for a buck. And I think that predatory lending practices are real, especially to kids in college age and so forth, young people, they get in these traps. So it does follow him and doesn't seem to go away. And you can see why he prefers the way the Indians live. And when he goes out look at it, like even now, I go out into the mountains. I have a lot of stress on me for one reason or another. I go off into the mountains and I hunt for 2 or 3 weeks, come back for a few days, go back again to another spot for another 2 weeks. My emails, they're not a thing. Like, I don't have connection to the outside world. Social media, I don't know what's happening. I have no clue. Like, unplugging like that for a month or more, it's therapeutic. It's like, it puts in perspective the things that really matter. I think that we're all drawn to go out into the wilderness, us that hunt a lot, for the very reason that we want to escape what it is that is your day-to-day stressful life. But when you get out there, it's a different stress. It's like a natural stress. It's like survive, get water, physical exertion, endure the cold, hike, all this kind of stuff. It's like almost like you're tapping into what it really means to be human when you're out there versus here in some modern sense. Civilization is the enemy of happiness in so many ways. Anyway, it goes on to say that he doesn't register deeds. He doesn't do paperwork. He doesn't read the fine print of contracts. He ignores businesses. He returned to the hunt, and he's just telling stories by the fireside and getting to the next ridge. I relate. Like, I am not. Look how many unopened emails I have. Look at if it weren't Suzanne, like, taking care of paying some bills, I mean, I am not the attention to detail administrative paperwork guy. I mean, I have expired tags on my truck for quite a long time. I have current plates now, but I mean,
oh, do you?
I go through, it's not those attention to detail. They're not my thing. I have found over the years that I can recruit others to do those things. Mm-hmm. One thing I will say is I spent a lifetime, like, accounting and finance were not my strength. Going to college for what I went to college for, the career I went down before I started Gritty, those were all my weaknesses that I wanted to make stronger. I went into areas of business and schooling and education that were not natural abilities because I hated the weaknesses that I had on that side of the ledger for me. I was always good at this other stuff, communication, conversation, podcast, film, creative things. It's the It's the administrative stuff, all that stuff on the side. But to be successful, you gotta be more balanced. And I always say, like, 40-year-old Brian succeeded where 30-year-old Brian would have failed, or 20-year-old Brian would have failed. Mm-hmm. Because of all those years, I did get into the corporate world, and I did learn a lot. Learn about how business works, how finances work. I learned about the bottom line at a company. I learned about a lot of things, which then enabled me later at 40 to do a podcast and to do filmmaking and things like that I do today that I truly enjoy and love, but I also monetize as a business. I don't know that I'd be one of those artist type folks, I feel like, that struggles to make ends meet had I not had a 15-year education on the other side of things through college and through business prior to what I do now. You know, there's a lot of people who have a lot of talent that do very talented things and cannot convert that into an income. It's a skill. It says that 1764 was a hard year. Daniel had to sell the one tract of land he had been given by his father. So 1764, he would have been 30. Probably somewhere in there. The house on Sugar Tree was on Bryan land. After 1764, he may not have owned one piece of property in a region where even the poor often had hundreds of acres.
Dang.
Frustrated by debt and failure as a farmer, Boone sought partners and backers for his expeditions across the mountains. He must have felt he was intended for something greater than just gathering deer hides in the Blue Ridge Mountains. According to Archibald Henderson, Boone was hired by the lawyer Richard Henderson and his associates in Salisbury to spy and explore land over the mountains as early as 1764. Hunters reported encountering Boone and Richard Calloway and Henry Skaggs as far west as the Clinch River in future Tennessee at the time. Boone met a group known as the Blevins Connection. On their return from a long hunt in Kentucky, he told them he was studying the geography and locography of these woods. Locography. Another made-up word, I think. I don't know. The local geography, the geography and locography.
Oh my gosh.
The Richard Calloway who accompanied Boone on this expedition was the nephew of Colonel Richard Calloway, with whom Boone would associate in Kentucky. On one of these early expeditions to the Cumberland Mountains, Boone was reported to have first sighted a large herd of buffalo from a peak and cried out, "I am richer than the man mentioned in Scripture who owned cattle on 1,000 hills. I own the wild beasts of more than 1,000 valleys." Nathan Boone would later say that his father was not employed by Henderson and Company until around 1774, which is just before the Revolutionary War. It is possible, even likely, that Richard Henderson, on his own account, paid Boone to report on the country he had explored across the mountains years before the Louisa Company was formed in 1774. But basically, it says right about this time that Boone is starting to get solicited by investors and explorers to explore and find new lands. And it says that at this time, that Boone's father, Squire, died on January 2nd, 1765. So Boone would have been about 35 years old when his dad passed away. And his dad was buried in Joppa Cemetery in Mocksville, North Carolina. He was 69 years old. The tombstone reads, "Squire Boone departed this life in the 69th year of his age, in the year of our Lord, 1765. The inscription may have been cut by Daniel himself, for the imaginative spelling resembles that in many of the documents in Daniel's handwriting. The symbol of the point within a circle carved in the stone suggests that Squire was indeed a Freemason. In those days, the sign was most often intended to show the duty of the individual brother to, quote, God and man by means of the circumference. But it was also a sign often taken to mean the divine spirit indwelling creation and abiding in the nature of man. It is possible that the sign was used to illustrate Tullian's definition of God as a circle, whose center is everywhere and circumference nowhere. According to a dictionary of Freemasonry, it is a symbol of the creation of the world. And it's on the tombstone. There is no more important milestone in a man's life than the death of his father. The death of a father may bring its own cloud of grief or regret, a sense of unfinished business, of questions that will forever go unanswered, A son feels alone in a particular way when his father dies. Suddenly he is on his own, and there may be a new sense of freedom that whatever has to be done is now up to him. The rest of life opens before the son, and there is no one he has to answer to but himself in the future. And the future is all too short, though it is a sweeping vista of obligation. The death of a father is a time for reaching out, for stretching, for moving ahead. So, yeah. When his father dies, and Boone seems to have a lot of respect and admiration for his father. His dad dies at 65? Mm-hmm. At that point, yeah, Boone kind of really questions what it is he's going to do with his own life, right? And what did we say? He's 30? Something, 35? Something like that. It says, when some friends arrived in the Yadkin in that summer and announced they were on their way to Florida, Boone decided to go with them. Now, looking at that map, there's no mountains between them and Florida. You know, it's still the coastline that you can travel. Now, Florida does have, you know, Everglades and forest and thick country, but it says that he should have been harvesting his crops and preparing his house for the cold winter and getting ready for trapping season, but this adventure to the mysterious world of Florida could not be resisted. And it would not hurt to be away from constant reminders of his debts. And so his brother Squire went along, and his brother-in-law, Hannah's husband, John Stewart. Free land had been announced in the panhandle of Florida after England acquired the region from France and Spain with the Treaty of Paris in 1763. And the 8 young men were going down to have a look. One document from the trip records Boone losing 3 pounds at dice. His companion, named Slaughter, was apparently an expert gambler. According to Nathan Boone, Slaughter was fond of gambling and won money going and coming back from Florida. This, along with the deerskins of the party, was enough to meet most of the expenses while passing through the settlements. In later years, Boone described this journey as if it was an extended holiday with exotic scenery, birds, and pretty Spanish and Indian girls. But when the party turned to hunting in the hammock country of the St. Johns River Basin, they found the swamps and thickets of Florida rough going. Do you think? John Stewart, who was awesome and never got lost, wandered on for several days. The others in the group became so lost they were rescued by Seminoles, the Indians in the area, who took them to their village and fed them. The vine tanglements, marshes of Florida were very different from the woodlands of the Appalachians, which ironically DeSoto had named for the Appalachia Indians who lived on the Florida Panhandle. What's so interesting too is, we mentioned this a few shows back. It's one thing to brag about how you are good at navigation when you're in the mountains of Montana or Wyoming, and it's another to brag about how you're good at navigations when you're in the flat forests of the Oregon coast, or it turns out where the Seminoles call home.
There's no hill
Florida.
to climb up and get a look around. Like, you are
It's just
flat.
brush everywhere.
As far as you can go.
It's flat. It's a plateau, or you get that becomes a whole different type of navigation ability. It says that moving on, they came home later. That was sort of a, like a little party trip, like a little vacation.
Did they find land down there? Free land?
Not kinda, but they didn't move down there. It says that in the fall of 1766, Rebecca agreed to move several miles up the Yadkin to Holman's Ford near the brushy mountains, and he built a cabin up there on a hill looking south across the Yadkin. So they were accompanied by a lot of family members. His brother Ned, Rebecca's sister Martha, John Stewart. And this was a pattern that would follow Boone throughout his life, where he would just get the itchy feet, want to move, he'd move, and everybody in the town or that lived around him would move with him. And Rebecca was constantly having to, set up a new home somewhere else. It says that this was all kind of leading toward the Cumberland Gap and the discovery of Kentucky. He just keeps moving further and further west, trying to find better and better hunting grounds, getting away from people, leaving his debts behind, selling everything and losing everything he owned and starting brand new again further west. It's kind of what Boone does most of his life. Anyway, we're about to get into the Cumberland Gap, and what Boone is probably the most famous for. Well, one of the things he's most famous for, and how he discovers it, how it comes to be, and basically how the West. I mean, once he discovers that and lays Boone's trace and all of that, just this surge of westward expansion just takes over the nation.
I'm excited. I want to hear some more about this because I ended up going down a little Wikipedia hole the other day on this Boone's Trace thing and read a couple things that it didn't really go into depth about. Like he had 30 people with him they called them Axemen. Mm-hmm. They just referred to them as the Axemen.
Yep.
And I was like, well, I want to know more about the Axemen. Are they just chopping trees?
And they get murdered left and right by Indians, or killed, I should say. I mean, these are people fighting for resources, story as old as time.
Yep.
They set up forts. They try to set up Boonesboro, which is a little village town that Boone found. Says, okay, this is where we're going to set up new cities. There's some fascinating characters that pop out. Politician type people.
Those are always fun.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So, folks, I hope you're enjoying the story. Hope it's painting a picture for you about history, filling in the gaps, and I hope you're enjoying it. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, you like what we're doing, you want to keep supporting us, like and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on our YouTube, follow us on iTunes, Spotify, wherever podcasts are. And share it with your friends. We appreciate that. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.
All right, folks, I hope you're enjoying the Dueling Pistols podcast. If you like it, do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help us get this thing to grow a little bit bigger. Tell your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your buddy, your uncle.
Go to
your
contacts,
grandpa.
hit select all, send.
Just sell it. Just share it with a friend of yours, somebody, and help us spread the word about the show. Thanks for supporting us. We'll catch you on the next episode.